Welcome to the official Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast. My name's Ian.
And my name's Nikki, bringing you the best in comics and graphic novels and updates from the festival.
Hello and welcome to the Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast, episode 95. My name is Ian.
And I'm Nikki.
And it's kind of warm, it's kind of hot.
Ian
I'm sat here
naked.
topless, naked,
Naked.
topless.
Naked.
The dogs are barking, the sheep are barring, the birds are singing.
Yeah.
And I've
Anything else?
no
now?
beer in my hand.
No, you got a cup of tea.
Cup of
You
tea.
said a cup of tea.
Cup of tea.
I said you could have Fanta.
I didn't want a Fanta, I wanted a beer, but I don't have any beers.
No, I'm not buying a beer.
Okay. Today we've brought an episode forward.
Yes.
The wonderful genius that
You
is
completely fanboyed.
Jeff Lemire. We had an interview with him about a month or so ago now.
Yeah.
Designed for episode 100. However, Sweet Tooth was dropped far earlier than we ever would have imagined on
Yes.
TV.
Yes.
On Netflix.
On the flicks of the net.
So we thought people need to know who Jeff is,
Yes.
if you don't know.
Yes. I'm just going to keep saying yes. Yes.
So we brought that forward. So we got a wonderful interview with the genius that is Jeff Lemire.
He was so nice. I
Oh,
know
he
I say
is.
this about everyone, but he was so nice.
No, it's because I think you look at the work he's done and you look at how he's got work in TV and you think, oh, he's going to be a certain type. And they never are.
No, they're always lovely.
Every time we've spoken to someone who you think is
upper echelons.
but they don't think like that.
No.
That's the thing.
No, it's what we're thinking
Yeah.
of them, yes. Yeah.
They do exactly the same, sit in their studio creating the comics and the work that they love. They don't treat themselves like superstars.
Yeah.
Which
But
is
he was, properly lovely, man.
properly lovely. He will be at the Lakes on a screen this year.
Yes.
And then hopefully next year he will be physically.
Yes, because he wants to come.
He did want to come, which is, he was almost coming this year and then it flipped and COVID and other stuff. And
Lovely
so,
COVID.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks,
Keep
COVID.
messing it up. But he should be here for 2022.
Yes. And we'll still be here,
Should be here.
so that'd be good.
So yeah, I'll be there with my little book. Sign
you
it.
will. You'll
Sign
be like,
it.
oh, giggly. You were pretty giggly on the interview, to be fair.
Shut up.
You'll hear it.
Shut up.
Proper fanboying.
Shut up. Before we've got a couple of books to review, but let's just quickly talk about, we've only seen episode 1 of Sweet Tooth. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts initially?
I liked it.
It's different to the book.
I did go, but that didn't happen in the book. But no, I liked it. I think they got the character design really well.
Mm-hmm.
To the comic. I want to see more.
I'm intrigued how they changed the story with the relationship with the father.
Yes.
Was different.
Yeah.
Which allowed it to be an episode
On its
based
own.
on its own.
Yeah.
I think the original episode was filmed like 9 months before the rest of them.
Oh, blimey.
Because it was like the
of
trial or
COVID.
year. No, it wasn't that. It was just the trial, what they call it. So
Pilot.
That one. The pilot episode. So the kid is slightly older. But yeah, so that's it. That is also set in a different part of the world to the rest of it. But yeah. But no, I think a good start, episode 1.
Yes.
We're
it's
rubbish. Have you
intriguing.
noticed? We're rubbish
We're really
at...
bad.
If it's on weekly,
Oh, we can do weekly.
we'll do it. If it's on
All at
in a bulk
once.
load, then...
Because it's because we don't know how to pace it. Because I'm not a binge watcher, really. I can do 2, and then that's about it. But I can't. I need it drip fed to
Are
me.
we old-fashioned?
Yes.
Are we from the era of
We're
weekly
old.
TV?
Yes, but there's something nice about waiting for something weekly.
I think WandaVision in particular showed the fun of being able to talk about each episode
And hide from the internet, obviously, if
well,
you hadn't
again,
watched
yeah,
it. There's that problem.
there is, but if you've got a full series, that makes it even worse.
Yeah, people are... I've already seen spoilers. I don't want to see anymore. So... Yeah, I like it drip fed and planning it into my schedule.
I think Netflix should set a thing up where
you can
choose to have things drip fed weekly from the launch or
you
not.
could have your own, like, because you got your My List, haven't you? You could have your weeklies. And yeah,
I'm going to pull that forward. I'm going to make
on a
a
certain
million
day
on
and
this.
just like notify you when it's on.
Done.
Oh,
Make our own version.
we've
of
told
Netflix.
everyone now.
Oh, damn it.
You've told everyone, and someone else will get it, and they'll earn millions, and you'll be ignored.
Anyway, that's used to that in life, in this house and everything. Right.
Seriously,
Let's do some...
you're one up from the goldfish, and the goldfish is dead.
let's talk about some comics. We've got 2 to talk about today, on very different ends of the scale.
Oh, very much so. Well done.
First, we're going to talk about Zara Slattery's Coma, published by Myriad. Do you want to give us a bit of the blurb on the back?
I was just having a cup of tea.
Never prepared.
At the age of 42, after persistent sore throat turned into a deadly bacterial infection, Zara Slattery was in intensive care with her husband and 3 children around her bedside. The world of Zara's 15-day drug-induced coma is a haunting, beautifully drawn fantasy, with mythological creatures appearing out of nowhere as she battles to protect her children against the forces of evil that threaten to engulf her. Meanwhile, her husband Dan tries to keep family life going as he faces the most difficult task of all, preparing the children for the likely loss of their mother. His diary and that of the nurses in the ICU who kept a record of Zara's illness interweave to make a heartbreaking graphic memoir.
This wasn't kind of what I was expecting. I think when, obviously, you read about what it was going to be about, I thought it was always going to be about her experiences. But the husband kept a diary of what he was going through while she was in a coma. And that was the interest for me.
Is that what got you? Was his perspective?
So the book itself jumps sort of almost between 2 art styles, doesn't it?
Oh, God, yeah, definitely.
The real life. Well, I say real life, you know what I mean? The world
everyday
of living.
Life,
of what the family and he's going through, and then her mind as it meanders and wanders within this coma.
Yeah.
A different style again.
Yeah.
Completely. And that, to me, I think people will get different things. Did you find it different?
Yes.
As a female, as a woman?
Yeah, from her perspective more. And going through that. Because I've not been in the same situation, but I've been on a lot of drugs, fighting for my life. But I did have to fight for my life at one point. And it is a weird experience from being in hospital end of it, even though I wasn't in a coma.
I think the only time I've been really sick, which was only for like 1 or 2 nights, you do go through serious dreams, I remember. And it's probably, again, not the same, but it's...
You don't... Because I was dying, and you don't realise you're dying. That's the thing. You don't know you're dying. And that's what I got from... she's fighting away. You're locked in there. Because you don't realise till afterwards that you're actually dying.
I suppose we'll never understand the coma side either. That's the other thing. That's another level, isn't it?
Yeah, because that's an enforcer. That's something... I mean, does your mind obviously fight against it?
Well, you're still alive there, so something's going on.
Yeah, and she gets that across really well in that kind of not messy way of how your mind is going, but that kind of thing, isn't it? It's horrible to think of. And drip
feeding sounds and noises from the outside, which then mix with whatever's going on within the mind. It must
be like that. You know, when you try and wake up from a dream and you can't, it's that horrible feeling, but then put into the fact you can't, and you're fighting, your body's fighting, and you're full of, drugs and everything else. Yeah, very.
But yeah, I mean,
powerful.
It's powerful, and as I say, I found it more his side more powerful.
Yeah, no, I found hers.
And also the way the story progresses, and I think this happens with many things, not just somebody in a coma, also with when you lose somebody important to you. You have somebody, everyone crowds around you, and then slowly start drifting away, or they don't drift away, and you just want them to go because you want that time to yourself. You want to not get back to normality, but you have to keep sane. Yeah.
I think, but it's hard for the people looking at someone going through that as
well. They're
well.
trying to help the best way they can, but they actually get in the way sometimes.
Yeah, it was when one of my best friends lost her mum, I stayed back because I didn't know how to approach, and then I approached like a bit later.
And it's hard.
It is hard. You never get it right.
But this book captures that, so you don't. You just have to have been through similar things, which I think everybody will have been in some way, shape, or form, and you can find meaning.
Yeah, that connection between you and the book.
Yeah, but no, exceptional book to
definitely.
read, and something that'll stick with you.
Yes,
whilst you're reading it, it's very good. So,
going out there with your other ones, isn't it, that you like?
I do like real life issues that people had, often medical, in some way, shape, or form. But they've got to have the heart as well. Yeah, that's the thing. And this one, it did, but on a different side, because they say it was a person who wasn't ill who got to you, because I'm a man. He's a man.
Okay, love.
That's my closing comment. That's what needs to go on the back, because he's a man.
Oh, no.
No, but yeah, wonderful book.
Yeah.
Right, something completely different.
I mean, this is going to stay with you for other reasons.
Matt Simmons, you are a dirty boy. I I do enjoy silliness in comics. I do enjoy a bit of adult humour, a bit of naughtiness. A certain Tony Esmond and co. like to do similar things. And this is just silly, over-the-top, sexualised comics for no reason whatsoever other than just to have a bit of a laugh.
I think you're going through a midlife crisis. You're all about the same age.
He's younger than me. I'm sure he is. If he isn't, he's doing well for himself. No, it's just silliness.
No.
It is just silliness. I mean, I admit...
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine.
I admit we went to pick it up from the local Lancaster comic shop and I wasn't expecting the imagery...
The lady to look so shocked when she sold it to you.
And it is very sexual, but it is just silly. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say, if you just want something to make you giggle like a little school child...
As an adult,
not for children.
No, it's not for children.
Then just go and have a treat. So treat yourself and have a giggle, have a laugh. And if you want an idea of what you might be getting into, Matt this week put some pre-imagery up of, like sketches of plans, which he also put underneath on the post. Mum, if you see this, don't click on the picture.
Right. Not safe for work.
Not safe for anything. Other than your own house.
Even then, I don't think it'll even catch fire, will it? We'll have to spray holy water on that one.
But yeah, silly fun. And the other thing to mention this episode is Loki. Episode 1 came on.
Yep.
How have you found that?
Interesting. I liked the, what they call the time people.
Timey-wimey things.
The timey-wimey stuff. I liked the opposites. I like the design of them. Mm-hmm. I like that kind of retro 1950s sci-fi, if you're in the 50s, what you thought sci-fi future things would be. I like that. Storyline's okay at the minute. It's not blown me away.
No.
I will stick with it and see what happens.
I was listening to another podcast, I must admit, and they were saying, yeah, it does feel like this was almost an episode 0.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the last 10 minutes where the story started to evolve a little bit more.
Yes.
Ready to kick off.
Yeah, it was definitely an episode 0. I didn't dislike it. I will watch the next one.
You will, because I'll stick it in front of you.
But yeah, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's okay. It's batting average.
I enjoyed while I was watching it. Yeah, it went on a bit long, maybe, I don't know. But then again, that's because they are building up.
They've got to build up this other university bit,
and maybe the full universe of the next lot of films and the timey-wimey malarkey and all that. So again, it's worth checking out.
It's worth checking out.
Worth checking out. I did burp. Yeah. You had something else to mention as well, didn't you?
Yes.
I will just fill the dead air while she finds the information.
I found it. I'm not good at this bit.
No.
So Corey had put it up on everything.
Corey? Who's Corey?
Corey Brothers. Everyone knows who Corey is. So there is I'm trying to find an actual name of it. Rewriting Extinction.
Okay.
So it's going over the next 12 months. It's a 12-month campaign to help raise money and awareness to tackle climate and biodiversity crisis, which we're all in at the minute, aren't we, really, if you think about it?
Mm-hmm.
There's around 300 of them creating stories. So the first story is up now, comic. Now. And it's done, it's got Carla Delevingne, Mikey Resolution, Kieran Gillen, and Sean Phillips has drawn it. It's really beautiful, actually. It's called Melody. And she says, flicking through. It's called Melody. I'm just opening up now.
We planned this.
No, I've gone on the wrong bit. Hang on. Got it now. I'm on the right bit. So it's a comic about saving the world. So Melody is a beautiful story written by Kieran Gillen and developed on a call and a whole bunch of audio messages with Carla Delevingne, Christabel Reid of Eco Resolution and Rewriting Extinction founder, Paul Goodenough, and beautifully painted by Sean Phillips. So it's about how you're noticing the creatures all around you. Mm-hmm. And is it the same as when you're a child? No, we've got less things around. It's also showing what is around us when we look up from our phones. And when you have that moment where you realise that, the world isn't the same as when you're a kid. But we should also celebrate in the moment of looking up and taking note of what's around us. So it's the first of many that are coming.
Is there a website or anything people can check this out on?
It's called rewritingextinction.com.
There we go.
I'm
Sorted.
not good at that. I'm not good on the news stuff.
Right, we're going to let you enjoy a little bit of Jeff Lemire.
So I was just finishing with
Then we've got Mike and Pete, then we'll come back and we've got an announcement to make. And then
Ian's pregnant.
And then, no, it's COVID, wait. And then some also festival news.
Room for one lawgiver, please.
Ah, Judge Dredd. Or is it just Dread? Fancy seeing you here.
Catwoman, you also here for the Comic Art Festival or a stint in the ISO cubes?
Of course. I love to see my makers in action. Ah! Watch it, Greenie!
Careful, Hulk. In this town we have a saying. Once is a coincidence, twice is a booking offence.
I think he booked the events on the website.
Huh?
ComicArtFestival.com. It's got all the perfect information about the event.
Yeah, so's my fist. Druck, I'm out of here. Not standing around with those 4 tortoises that have just entered the building. Cowabunga, dude!
Find out all about the Lakes International Comic Art Festival and booking information at www.comicartfestival.com.
Today's episode, I am very pleased and honoured to have the wonderful Jeff Lemire on with us. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. How's lockdown been over in Canada then?
Well, it's all things considered pretty good for me. It doesn't luckily with what I do for a living, it doesn't really affect me. I'm able to work and whatnot. So I've been pretty lucky, so I can't complain, I guess.
Did you do much in the way of Comic Cons beforehand, or is that really?
I didn't do them as much as a lot of creators do. I'd probably do maybe 2 or 3 a year. But I always kind of complained about how much I didn't like doing them. But now I really took them for granted because I just missed that. Just getting a break from work and traveling a little bit and connecting with friends and fans and socializing and all those things that we just took for granted. Suddenly I would just love to do that anytime.
Just to get to a pub. That's all I want, just a pint of beer. So were you reading comics as a kid? What were you reading back then?
Yeah, I started really young. And pretty much as young as I can remember, I was getting comics. So, I grew up in a really small town in Canada. So this was early 80s. So there wasn't really any comic shops around, so it would just be whatever I could get on the newsstand, in the small towns where my mom would take me when we went for groceries or whatever. And it was all just Marvel and DC. It was really all that was available, the mainstream stuff. And I was just completely drawn to it, especially for whatever reason, the DC stuff really captured my imagination as a kid, even more than the Marvel stuff. So I would kind of honestly, I'd get anything I get my hands on, but especially anything DC. And I would just spend most of my free time as a kid drawing, copying drawings from those comics and things like that. So in that, we're talking, age 6, 7, as young as I can really remember doing stuff. It was always kind of around comics for sure.
So over here we grew up, as well as having DC and Marvel, we had 2000 AD obviously being sort of, is there anything equivalent in Canada? Did they have their own sort of comics?
No, we didn't really have that. I think the only comics we really got were imports from the US. But aside from, there was, I think, one Canadian comic, Captain Canuck. But even that, I didn't really discover that until I was a little older either, because I don't think we really got it around the part of Canada where I was from. So yeah, it was all Marvel, DC stuff. And then, of course, when I got a little bit older, I would go into the larger city near where I grew up, where there was a comic shop, and that's where I really started to get exposed to independence and things like the stuff that really kept me interested in comics as I grew up.
So, how did you get into creating comics then? Was it right you went to film school initially.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it was kind of, I mean, comics were always sort of my first love, but there wasn't, unlike now where there's actual programs, post-secondary school programs for comics all over the place. Like when I was in high school and coming out of high school, not, comics weren't as sort of widespread as they are now, and it was much more of a niche thing. And there was no schooling to do comics, so I could go to art school or something like that, but there wasn't really a path to making comics. And I did go to art school for 1 year, but was kind of frustrated with that. And I thought, at least with film, there was a focus on narrative storytelling and visual storytelling, and it kind of, there was a crossover with comics for sure. And I don't think that I really had a career in comics in sight. That didn't seem like a realistic thing, but film certainly touched a lot of the same interests that I had in comics. So, and also it gave me an excuse to move to Toronto, which is the biggest city here in Canada, which I just needed to get away from the small town I grew up in, and kind of see the world a little bit, and spread my wings. So, and also I was 18, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But anyway, yes, I did end up in Toronto at film school for 4 years, and I really loved it. And I learned a lot, about cinematography and writing and a lot of things. But actually, it was a 4-year program, and by that fourth year, I kind of rediscovered my passion for drawing and for comics even more. And I kind of almost stopped going to school and just start drawing comics. I'd stay home, skip classes, and start drawing these comics. And so by the time I graduated, my focus was like 100% on trying to self-publish and make, mini comics and draw my own things. And so I did that for several years, just kind of on my own here, without publishing anything, and just sort of learning and getting a little bit better until I did self-publish my first book in like the mid-2000s. And one project just kind of led to another until I ended up making a career of it.
Were you sort of writing stories as well, growing up, as well as the art there?
I was always drawing and writing. But even whenever I was drawing, it was always narrative, it was always stories. So, it was just always, everything was always about story with me. So I was either writing or drawing stories or just inventing crazy worlds in my head and acting them out, But yeah, I mean, I never really focused on that writing until I went to film school and sort of was forced to actually, do these projects or that they would give you and write and kind of focus all that energy into something. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing that I love about your work is a story, and the amount of work that you must put into that to get these stories flowing so well. It always impresses me. It's I think it's what stands out with your work. It exhausts
me, so I'm glad it impresses.
So whilst you were doing these initial comics, were you still having to work on the side, I'm guessing? Were you doing a day job or?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I wasn't making any money doing comics or whatever. So I had to find something to pay the bills, and I wanted to find a job that had nothing to do with the creative stuff I wanted to do, so that I didn't use any of that energy for anyone else. I kept it all for myself. So I started working in restaurants and as a dishwasher, and then eventually in the kitchens. So I ended up being like a line cook in kitchens around the city for a good decade here. So I would, and I would work night shifts mostly, which was great. So I'd work at night, force myself to get up early, and then draw most of the day, and then go to work again. It really created a real discipline, because you'd have to force yourself to use your time wisely if you want to get comics done. So, it would force me to get up at a certain time and get to my drawing desk and put in those hours before I had to do my day job, or my night job. So, and that discipline was really good for me. And I've always kind of stuck with that. So I was doing that, and until probably until I started getting work with Vertigo in around 2008 or so. I think I did a graphic novel for Vertigo, and then of course the book Sweet Tooth got greenlit there. And once I started making page rates and could quit the job, then I never looked back.
But I think it's important to hear that because we speak to so many people, small press, slogging it out every day, doing the jobs, that there is the chance down the line, if you just keep working at it, there's that opportunity there. Just keep learning the craft, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah,
it's hard. That was a good almost a decade of making comics almost every day and not making a single penny from it, before, and it's hard to kind of keep going and just keep believing in yourself when you're almost a decade of doing something. And there definitely were moments where you're like, what am I doing? And I'm never going to make any money doing this and everything else. But then you just get those little breaks along the way that kind of validate it a little bit, and the right people seeing your work at the right time and telling you, giving you encouragement or whatever, just whatever you need at the time to keep you going. I guess I was lucky enough to get those little moments.
And then you dived and did Essex County. That was sort of your first.
Yeah, that was kind of my. Yeah, I had self-published a couple of mini comics, and then I did a graphic novel called Lost Dogs that I self-published in 2005. And then the next thing I did after that was the Essex County graphic novels, and I kind of did the first volume of it. Was sort of originally it was 3 volumes. They've all kind of been collected now as one, but I did the first one of those just on my own, thinking I would self-publish it. But when it was done, I kind of felt like I had something a little bit that was a little step up from what I had been doing in the past, and so I decided to submit it to a few publishers, and I think I submitted to Top Shelf, who ended up publishing it, as well as a couple others. And so when Top Shelf picked that up, that was obviously a big breakthrough for me to have another one of those moments of validation where instead of self-publishing, all of a sudden there's an actual publisher who believed in the work enough to put it out, which was great. And they also kind of supported me doing it as a trilogy of books instead of just the one book. Yeah. And so, I did those, and they those were the kind of my breakout. They got nominated for some Eisners, and the books got some critical attention, and that led to some editors at Vertigo Comics. Bob Schreck was an editor at Vertigo Comics who was also friends with the guys from Top Shelf in Portland, and he really liked the book and asked me to pitch some stuff to Vertigo, which led to Sweet Tooth and everything else I've done. So, yeah.
In regards to this account, we didn't ask for questions because I get too many. But Tony Esmond, another fan of yourselves, asked in regards to this account, the kids' comic sections within the book. You've got a different style. Was that done by yourself, or was it a younger?
It was done by myself. Those were actual comics I had done when I was like 8 years old or 9 years old that I kept.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I put them in as the characters' comics. You can't fake that stuff. You know what I mean? You can't. If you try to draw like a kid, it looks like an adult trying to draw like a kid. But that's why they kind of feel authentic, is because they were. Just I have a whole stack of those somewhere.
Yeah, yes.
I really wish I'd got stuff from being a kid. It'd be amazing. But that's amazing.
Great.
So the one for me, Underwater Welder. Right. My history reading your books was sort of Black Hammer was the first one I read.
Okay, cool.
And then it's like, oh, Jeff's a great writer, brilliant writer, and then looking in depth and looking at the books you created, and then I picked Underwater Welder up, and there's not many comics, certainly not biographical, that have made me cry, and that shed a tear. That book, that whole father-son relationship was just amazing. Where did that idea for the story come from?
From a lot of different places, but I was the actual sort of the underwater welder aspect of it. That job that when I was working in a restaurant, like I mentioned earlier, I was working with another cook whose brother was training to be one of these underwater welders, and I had never heard of this profession before, and it just seemed completely insane. And he started telling me about it, so I did some research in it. Not only is it very dangerous and everything, but visually, and it just struck a chord with me how kind of cool and interesting that, like, these big helmets, and they're like so deep under the water, like with a flame. It's like the weirdest.
It shouldn't work.
thing. It's like science fiction, really, and so visually it really struck me, and I kind of stuck with me. And then, in terms of the themes of the story and everything, I kind of came up with the story itself when my wife and I were having our first kid, or our son. This was so 2008, 2009. She was pregnant, and all kind of all the anxieties and fears that I had becoming a parent. I sort of channeled it into this character of this underwater welder who was facing the same things, but also doing this job where the pressure and everything was so extreme, and it became a metaphor for impending fatherhood and the ghost of his own past with his father. And so it all kind of came around all around that time, and it just again, visually, I just was really struck by it, and the more I drew the character underwater and everything else, it kind of, the story just sort of seemed to fit it perfectly. So it all came from a very personal spot for sure. You
can tell, to be fair, but say it's a brilliant story. How do you sort of decide on a style when you're drawing? Because there is quite a difference between the Essex County and the Underwater Welder, even though it's black and white. There's a very clear contrast. Do you sit and work on it for a while, or does it sort of just sit?
I think it's more of a natural evolution of just the same style, where I kind of draw it a very specific way. I mean, so I think any difference between, say, Essex and Welder, or Welder and the stuff I'm doing now is just it's not a conscious thing, really. It's just the natural, the way my drawing style changes over time, to be honest with you. Yeah. But I do know that with Welder, one big decision I made was Essex County was completely black and white, obviously, and with Welder I used an ink wash, which gave it a wet look, which suited the subject matter. You know what I mean? So it was a pretty simple idea, but that was one key difference there. The washes definitely work with the nautical theme and the underwater elements and everything else.
I think the thing that jumped out to me as well was that the silent scenes. Yeah, they really jump out at you and pull you into the story, more so in some way than the text. Do you find them challenging, or do you feel because
no, it always felt very natural to me when I started doing comics, and maybe that may come from my film background. I'm not sure, if it did or not, but just the ability to tell what comics can do so well, I think, is that they can tell a story visually, and you don't always need to load the page up with words, or overwrite things. So I always felt very natural for me to have these sort of silent things because I feel like with those scenes, the comics become more interactive a little bit, where the reader is projecting their own thoughts and their own kind of pacing on the story, whereas it's not just given to you in thought balloons, so I like the timing of that, the way that the reader gets a little more immersed in the world that way. And I do find that in mainstream comics, there is a tendency to overwrite everything and have sort of those narrative caption boxes just load the page up with explaining everything the characters are thinking and doing. And to me, that always seems like the comics can be something much more than that, I think. The way that you lay out the page, or the way you do paneling and pace a story, it can tell so much more than whatever you could put into thought balloons. That's the magic of comics to me.
Cinematic is right, though. You're right in the way you say that. A bit like a film in the way it just slowly progresses.
Sure.
And it just pulls you in. Mm-hmm. It's gorgeous. Sweet Tooth as well. Then that's the other big one. Very different story to the other two. How did this one come about?
Yeah, I think when I was doing I had done Essex County and I'd done Underwater Welder. I'd started on Underwater Welder, and those were both very sort of personal, grounded kind of stories. There's certainly some fantastic elements in those stories and some magical realism and whatnot, but they're not genre stories, And when they asked me to pitch to Vertigo, Vertigo specifically did publish genre work, whether it be science fiction or horror or crime stuff. So I think that was definitely in my mind. And I obviously grew up aside from all the indie comics I love and things like Essex and Welder, I also love genre comics and superheroes and science fiction and all that cool stuff too. So I kind of, the chance to do a science fiction story was really exciting to me, and because it was a little different from what I had done, and it would be very easy to keep repeating myself, you know. So I took on the challenge, and I always loved post-apocalyptic stuff. And I mean, obviously now there's just a glut of it, but this was, you know, a decade ago, and that stuff still seemed pretty fresh and fun to me. And I'd always loved those kinds of stories. And so when the chance came to pitch for Vertigo, I kind of just leaned right into it and pitched a really kind of sprawling science fiction epic, but still hopefully with sort of the heart and the character work that I put into my other books, you know, to set it apart. So
definitely. And the move to color as well.
That was Vertigo. They published color comics, so it was sort of a necessary thing. And at that time, I had never really worked much with color at all. So I looked to find someone I could trust, and I worked with Jose Villarrubia, who was an experienced veteran comic book colorist and a friend of mine, who took over the color on that. And since then, I've started coloring my own stuff more. But back then, it was, especially on a monthly deadline, it was more than enough just to draw that book every month, and have someone else deal with the color was fine with me.
And so it's picked up for a TV series as well.
Yes, yeah.
How did that feel when that sort of came about?
It's very weird. You live with these characters, especially the stuff that I both written and drawn myself. It's very, very close to my heart and comes right from me and totally from me. Just so to see other people sort of interpreting it and doing it, it can be very surreal, but it's ultimately pretty exciting. You know, I think I've seen the first 6 episodes now of the show, and very happy with it. And hopefully, you know, it will bring the world of Sweet Tooth to a much wider audience, and more people will check out the comic, which is the ultimate goal for me. But yeah, it's very surreal to see these things you've created literally walking and talking and having a life of their own beyond you. You have to kind of adjust to that a little bit, but it's exciting.
I didn't realize there were already 6-episode films. I thought they were earlier than that. That's exciting. I mean, it's
that's done. I think it's coming this year, sooner than later. So.
Blooming heck.
Okay.
That's hello. Hello, are you back?
There you guys hear me?
Yeah, yes. we lost you then for a few seconds. That's fine though. You just finished talking.
We froze up there. Yeah.
That's cool.
All good.
Right, we'll move on then to Marvel and DC. You had a few years working with some comics there. What were your favourite comics then between those two companies that you worked on?
I mean, definitely the ones that stand out for me. I wrote a lot of stuff for about five or 6 years. I was writing a lot of books for the companies, and some I think were more successful than others, which is kind of what happens when you're not controlling every aspect of it yourself, like I'm used to, you know. So, but you know, the ones that stand out the most for me from those years would be the Animal Man run that I did at DC, and the Green Arrow run I did with Sorrentino was great, which also, of course, led to us working together on other projects. But and at Marvel, I really like the Moon Knight run that I did. So yeah, those would be the ones that kind of are the highlights for me.
Any particular character you'd like to go and work on from those two?
I got a chance to do a lot of the stuff I wanted to be honest. I you know, these days my imagination and my kind of creative energy is much more in creating my own stuff. But you know, I do have a pretty fond affection for a lot of the DC characters. Swamp Thing was always a character that I loved, and obviously the Alan Moore run is pretty formative work for a lot of people, myself included. And I never really got a good chance to tackle Swamp Thing, so hopefully that's maybe something I could remedy at some point. But yeah, I kind of feel like I've scratched a lot of the itches that I had for those companies, and it was a lot of fun doing that. But I've kind of feel like I've maybe moved on a little bit more to focusing on my own stuff again now.
Well, you've got, like I say, we've got your own superhero group there
That's
with Black Hammer.
I kind of, when I did Black Hammer, it was a chance to kind of do a lot of the characters or the concepts I loved, but do them on my own terms, my own way, without so much, editorial kind of input or without having to tie into a world that I didn't control. And so it kind of more than scratched the itch now, where whenever I do kind of want to do a superhero thing, I can sort of take concepts or characters I love and kind of reinvent them or repurpose them into something of my own.
How was it handing these characters over to someone else to draw, though? Was it something you wanted to do yourself, or was it always planned to be passed over to Dean initially?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. My career kind of went into 3 stages where it was, I started off just writing and drawing everything myself, with Essex and Welder and Sweet Tooth. And then I started writing for other artists at DC, where I would write, work with all kinds of different artists. And then I think around 2014, 15, I was kind of moving away from the DC and Marvel stuff a little bit and looking to do more creator-owned books. And I kind of, at that point, kind of took the best of both worlds, where I could create my own worlds and write the stuff and then bring in other artists to do them. So, I launched a couple of creator-owned books around the same time with Descender and Black Hammer, and that was the first time kind of doing creator-owned stuff that I didn't draw myself. And it was interesting. It was at first it was a little hard to let go of those things, because Black Hammer was something that I originally kind of came up with in my sketchbooks and was going to draw myself at one point. But it just became obvious that I couldn't do all the stories I wanted to do myself, because you can really only draw one thing at a time. It's so time consuming to draw a comic. But so there was no way I could do them all myself. And once you kind of let go and start working with people like Dean or Dustin, it's really rewarding and fun. And you can, it allows you to kind of open up the world and do all kinds of things with it that you could never have had time to do yourself. So, and to have these great collaborations where you kind of, together with the artist, you kind of create something more than what you would have done on your own, or something different than what you would have done on your own. And that can be really rewarding.
And do you write with a particular artist in mind?
Yeah, usually almost all my projects, except for Black Hammer, all my creator-owned books since then, I've usually teamed up with the artist first without a story in mind, and then come up with a story thinking about the artist, So I always kind of create stuff suited for whoever I'm collaborating with.
I think with the latest one, Snow Angels, that was fairly obvious. To be honest, Jock's art is amazing.
Actually, that one was one I was going to draw myself too.
Okay,
I come up with that.
I'm sure that's me wrong. Then
I come up with Snow Angels around the same time as Black Hammer. This would have been 2008 or something. In my sketchbooks, I started drawing this trench and these characters, and it was one I was going to draw myself, and I never had the time for it because other projects always kind of took precedent. But I always kind of loved the concept and it never really went away. And then eventually I connected with Jock, and then it's once you connect with Jock and start writing it for him rather than myself, it just sort of takes on a different life, and can't imagine it without Jock now. So it's just like you can't imagine Black Hammer without Dean, and that's kind of cool. And I love that. So
it's amazing already, the art. I mean, as we're recording this, one issue in, but the art is stunning.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I've wanted to work with Jock for a long time, but he's always been super busy, and I've always been really busy. So it did take a while. I wrote the first couple, maybe I think the first 4 Snow Angel scripts for Jock in 2014, and he's had them since then, and then he didn't start drawing them until last year.
Does it at his own pace.
He's on pace, but I didn't write the rest of the series until he started getting into it. So I wrote all 10, and he's actually drawn all 10, so it's done, which is great. I'm glad you like the first one, but I think Jock and I both feel that the series gets stronger as it goes. So we're excited for people to see where it goes, for sure.
Superb. And you've gone with Comixology as well as what's your sort of sight on the future of comics? Are you seeing digital maybe as the preferred medium down the line, or?
It's really hard to predict what's going to be what. I think with us for this project in particular, it just felt like it was a good time to try something a little different. When we first started working on it a year and a half ago, it was right before the pandemic, and we had both done a number of creator-owned books. I'd done a lot of stuff at Image and Dark Horse, and Jock had done some stuff at Image with Witches, and it just felt like maybe for this one, why not try something a little different and just diversify a little bit. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit and a lot of the comic shops closed for a while, it felt like, well, let's try this where we can still put it out online. And thankfully, comic shops were able to open sooner than we hoped, or than we thought they might. But I think it's cool. It's just good to try different things, and there will be a print edition at some point, obviously too, with that stuff. But it's neat to put something out online digitally and sort of just try something different. I've done a lot of books at this point, so it's always fun to try something different. And but in terms of what I think the future of comics are, and I've stopped trying to guess because who knows the future of anything is right now.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's changing every day at the moment. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I still love print. I don't read a lot of stuff digitally. I just love having a book in my hands, and I know it's like that for a lot of people, and I don't really see that changing. But I think there's room for all of it, really. Anything that allows the books or the stories to kind of be more accessible or reach a wider audience is a great thing, and I think digital certainly does that. And I think there's room for both, for sure. Yeah.
Means you don't have to have a stupid amount of shelving for books.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, there is. So of all your sort of pieces of work and books, which is the one you're most proud of? I know it's probably hard to pick one, but is the one that stands out?
Yeah, it is really hard to pick because I feel like every book is sort of a testament to whoever I was when I was doing it, Okay. So it's, I always put so much into the projects that whatever I'm working on at the moment is always the one I'm the most passionate about, and it's really hard to go back and pick and choose. But certainly Essex County is always special because it was sort of my first book and my most autobiographical and the book that kind of put me on the map as a comic book creator. So that's always special to me. And then Sweet Tooth as well is probably the project I worked on the longest. So that one has a place in my heart always as well,
And so you got any plans you can announce for the future? What are you looking for the next year or so?
Yeah, it's been the last year has been really, well, aside from the fact that the world has been upside down, the last year's creatively has also been very different for me in that a lot of the books I'd been working on for the last 3, 4, 5 years have all kind of come to an end or are coming to an end, with Descender, Gideon Falls, both ending. So it's kind of a transitional period for me where I'm starting new projects again and developing new books and new series that I've been working on now that probably won't come out for another year at least. So it's kind of too early to really talk about any of them, but I am. There's three books that I'm writing for artists right now that I'm slowly developing and writing, and then a new thing that I'm drawing myself as well. So there's a lot of work being done that won't be seen for a good year at least.
It's exciting. It's exciting. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. It's been wonderful talking to you. And hopefully at some point down the line, you might get over to good old Blighty.
Yeah.
We'll get some books signed.
Oh, definitely.
I would love to. Yeah. It's my favorite place to be is the UK. So I always, I've been trying to go every year before the pandemic hit. But, so as soon as we're on the other side of this thing, I'll be back for sure.
Superb. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thanks a lot.
Yakapedia, Yakapedia with my kind. Yakapedia,
How do? I'm Mike Williams.
And I'm Pete Taylor.
We are the creators and compilers of the comics Yakapedia, a giant multi-volume encyclopedia that contains everything interesting about comics that's worth yakking about.
As custodians of this mighty tome, it is our duty to review, amend and correct its many thousands of entries to ensure it remains the definitive library of comic lore and trivia.
But we will also be requiring the help of you, our loyal listeners, to help keep the Yakapedia up to date and supply your own intriguing comics data. More on this at the end. Well, hello.
Marin. How's it going?
Very good, he says, lying.
Hot enough for you?
It's sweltering in here.
Kickstarter corner, hands up. I need to rename myself the boy who cried Kickstarter. Because I keep appearing and saying, my Kickstarter's coming. But I can honestly say that the pre-launch page is now live for the Catfood Comics 3-pack. So if you go to catfoodcomics.com/Kickstarter or search, I think you could just search 3-pack, to be honest, Catfood Comics 3-pack. In Kickstarter, you will get to the page that you can sign up to that will tell you when I go live, which is soon, I promise. I've only got the postage to work out. But we have 3 books, very nattily packaged in an actual 3-pack with a cardboard header on the top. So, yeah, sign up there for details, but it is coming. It is coming.
I really like the preview pages on Kickstarter. I'm seeing a lot more of them now. I was lucky enough. I was guessing I was one of the first you gave access to for a bit of a mull over. But yeah, it's really handy. You obviously tick up to be notified when it goes live and stuff. But being used a lot now for comics and role-playing games and board games and all sorts of stuff. And I quite like it because you get a good idea of what's going to be on offer. So yeah, it's looking nice, that, Pete.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's a good idea. And what's really cute about that pre-launch page is there's a lot to get in place. You know, you've got all of the background stuff on the Kickstarter. So once it's been approved, you can kick that page off and start telling people, well, I am a little rigid. I like everything to be in place even before I start promoting it, which is daft. But things happen and delays happen. Just looking for the right kind of bag ended up costing me an extra 5 days, because the bag I wanted I had to order from Sweden or something like that, just to fit everything and get it the right way. It was daft. So all of that time, soaks up. So I don't want to hit the button until it's right. But once the pre-launch page is set up, it is live on Kickstarter, whether you've promoted it or not. So it is quite cool to see people that they are just organically finding it without being told about it and following it. So it's real confidence booster to find that there are people that have just it's great. So
I might start having a look to see what I can find on there as well.
Yeah.
But the great thing is you can get feedback as well. People leave comments to say, or if they spot mistakes on the page and stuff, which is all great before it goes live, I think.
It is. No, it's a big confidence boost. No. Oh, no, my chair's a bit squeaky.
Well, on to the mighty tome itself, the Yakapedia. And I've had a bit of an issue. I've been trying to update an entry that goes back all the way to the 50s. Hail to the Chief, which is the use of the real-life president in Marvel Comics. But I'll come to the reason why I'm struggling to update this entry. So I guess I better give a bit of background as to what we already have on this subject. Marvel Comics have always pretty much consistently used the real-life President of the United States within the Marvel Universe. Mm-hmm. I guess the main difference with DC is that they do actually include real-life cities where they base around a lot of their stories. So you've got New York's going to be the hub of so many, and LA and the like. And as far back as I remember, there was always a real president at the end of a telephone or making occasional other contributions to storylines. So, when I started going through this, I suppose one comic fact a lot of people know is that Thor actually saved JFK's life. That's a whole story in its own right. Probably another another Yakapedia entry there and then. But going a bit further back than my own memory, the Nixon era in the 70s. Now, that was quite an interesting treatment. Marvel seems to consistently treat the president, with all due respect, as a great man that got to a great position, and obviously through a fantastic democratic process, so all's good. In the 70s, Nixon obviously went through some very big highs and lows during his presidency, mostly lows. And they kind of portrayed him merely as making the odd dodgy call, especially with the Fantastic Four, who he seemed to work most closely with, in things like how they should take on the Submariner. And it was always portrayed as he listened to his aides much more than he should have, rather than listening to his true self. And he was always shown as being regretful as well. But he did oversee the Fantastic Four repelling Galactus, and he even pushed the feminist agenda by putting Sharon Carter in charge of the new all-female SHIELD Spec Ops team, Fem Force. But then he did try and shut down the state-sponsored hero team First Line. But still, ultimately, still respected. President Ford that followed was a lot less number of appearances. Notably overseeing the Hulk's internment and being mind-controlled by Nebulon, and his leaving office allowed a slim chance for Howard the Duck and his bid for presidency.
Yes.
But of course, he lost out to Carter. Carter, again, he received very neutral treatment. And he was saved from several assassination attempts. That seemed to be quite a popular storyline, actually. He survived the likes of Deathlock, Viper, and Silver Sabre's better half, or Bitter X, whichever, Foreigner. And it was a bit of a meme of let's try and assassinate the president for a while. And again, I'm not reading too much into that.
Do you reckon? Have you got any figures on the party of the president? So were more Democrats targeted for assassination than Republicans?
Not with assassinations as such, but definitely on where the balance and neutrality lay. Right. I would definitely say there's kinder treatment or more cooperative treatment with Democrats.
Okay.
In general, but for this period, still very balanced.
Yeah, well, and the period counts.
It really does, actually. Yeah. Reagan was a very, very hands-on president, and I think actually some of it has to do with popularity. Full stop, and how much they are. If you think Nixon, good or bad, was very much in the public eye globally, and so was Reagan, I think, more than Carter, but very hands-on president, and this is where my memories kind of kick in as well. Yeah. There's a little bit of research, but he was always in the loop, and he was always at the end of the phone or reported to by the likes of Nick Fury. He even debriefed people or went out to actually ask heroes for help. I mean, I always remember the Reagan era because it informed a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you think with the formalization of the Superhuman Activities Committee, Committee of Superhuman Activities, that was the one. And that was when they took back the shield as well to be part of the United States emblem as such. Yeah. And then they had the first state-sponsored Captain America, which is John Walker, which we've obviously now up to date with in the cinematic universe. But generally, they were ironically less assassination attempts for Reagan, which is obviously quite good considering the real life assassination attempts. So again, I don't know which follows which.
I think there's probably maybe seen as bad taste to revisit that because it actually happened.
And I guess most notable mention has to be when he was turned into a snake. I've seen the panels, but I have no context to that whatsoever. Bush Senior was always seen again debriefing Nick Fury and taking advice as well, but was very much a background presence again. Kind of again, popularity-wise, I don't know if that had a factor. Clinton enjoyed only slightly more coverage, but across a lot more titles actually. And his most notable appearance was chasing Wakandan ally Everett Ross around the White House with a hockey stick, supposedly after something that T'Challa had said that annoyed him. So again, I don't have the background to that, but I'm assuming it's some kind of Wakandan freedom speech. I don't know.
I think that's in the Marvel Knights version, which is where Everett K. Ross got introduced. Yeah, Christopher Priest wrote the entire run. It's 50 odd issues, and I think that was pretty much how, if I remember rightly, that's how Everett K. Ross gets introduced. I think he's
right.
Or it's late. No, he gets introduced. He's in a tenement in sitting on a toilet surrounded by rats, I think is how he gets introduced. But yeah, when he goes back to the White House, I think I love that run. So yeah, Christopher Priest was that he reinvented T'Challa for the next generation. But yeah, I do remember Clinton being in it.
One thing I do remember was he was a pallbearer as well for Captain America.
Okay.
I don't know why that stuck in my mind. I hope I'm right on that.
Right.
It's in the Yakapedia now, so.
So it was an alternate reality somewhere. It's true.
Of course, next up was Bush Jr. And I think Marvel was a lot more sympathetic than the mainstream media with Bush Jr. Often seeing him as a bit misguided rather than outright stupid, to be honest, which was, especially out with America. I think that was a kind of a common meme with him, wasn't it? But you have to remember that Marvel did actually include the events of 9/11 into their universe, and the aftermath of. And I always saw that they kind of mirrored the impact on America with them writing the Stanford incident, where Nitro basically nukes a load of hundreds of innocents, and this led to the whole Registration Act and the whole Civil War epic. Mm-hmm. And like in real life, Bush was kind of portrayed as a leader caught in a unimaginable situation, rather than doing the right or the wrong, and it became more of a question of moral and all this kind of stuff. And I always saw I always felt there was a bit of a mirroring of events they could deal with how America was feeling at the time without simply referring to 9/11.
Yeah. And
then comes Obama. Now at this point, all pretense of neutrality is just thrown out the window. With Barack's infamous thumbs up cover of The Amazing Spider-Man 583. This is just a clear Marvel endorsement. And it was a huge bestseller. Of course, Obama was actually on record as being a Spider-Man comic collector. So that's always quoted as a reason. But that issue, incidentally, got a second print run, which I don't think any of them had until that particular issue, and it remained very collectible, both first and second print runs then. And this is where I've run into the problem doing the update, because then there is no President of the United States. Trump is not mentioned in context as being the president at any point during his presidency. obviously, I had to go down to the other warehouse to pull out a couple of other volumes of the Yakapedia just to see. And Trump's presence in the Marvel universe, he is there. He does exist. He was there as a celebrity in previous issues. In 2008, we saw Luke Cage lift a limousine out of the way that was blocking an ambulance, only for Trump to emerge and threaten to sue him. And this seems to be a bit of a blueprint from this point onwards. In his run-up to the White House in 2016, there is a couple of Marvel mentions. There's a quite unsubtle Red Skull rally speech to white supremacists that many took as a dig and a reference to some real-life rally speeches that Trump was making at the time. And the ultimate not Trump reference has to be his likeness was used in the 2016 Spider-Gwen annual as MODOK, the mental organism designed as American king, a not MODOK supervillain harassing Mexican workers. This was all taking place in Earth 65, so no harm done. So, despite the presidency of 2017 to 21, there is no reference to Trump as president in the Marvel universe. Interesting. I was wondering whether you had any views.
Just, I seem to remember that somebody had a foreword or an introduction to a book rejected as well because they mentioned Trump in it. I seem to remember something, and it was when you mentioned Red Skull. I seem to remember reading it on a comic news site, something about the term Orange Skull, which was around at the time. And I think, do you remember? Does that ring a bell?
No, I'd not heard of this, but I obviously get the
might have even been. He might have been Art Spiegelman. I'll have to look it up, but I do remember. I think somebody quite not within a comic story, but actually, I think talked about Trump during his presidency, and it was rejected, and they publicised it. And there's obviously a sort of bigger connection between Marvel and Trump in that their owner, Ike Perlmutter, was a big Trump fan. So the actual boss of Marvel was a personal friend of MODOK. So I can't help feeling that there might have been, a lot of internal restraints, especially if it had started to if he'd certainly been portrayed previously in a sort of negative way as a celebrity. I think there was probably, somebody upstairs saying, take that out, or just don't go there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Ike actually donated like $1 million, didn't he, to this to Trump's veteran fundraising charity, but I wasn't sure whether it was maybe just a simple case of they've never had such a divisive presidency, and it was such a clear split in society, and I think things got a little too real when you saw news footage of white supremacists fashioning their own Captain America riot shields, which is just the biggest misunderstanding of the source material to ever be made by far-right cosplayers, ever.
Well, Punisher as well.
The Punisher logo, again, is another one that's been appropriated originally for military use
and police,
which is now seen on police, and
so that's getting to be the wrong kind of connections. Interesting when you mentioned Civil War as well, because a big point of that Civil War origin, if you like, you mentioned Nitro, that was filmed as part of a reality TV show in the story.
Yes, it was.
The New Warriors were I think in a reality TV show, and they were shown to be endangering the public, wrongly. Yeah, not wrong. They were endangering the book for the sake of this TV show. So there's that reality TV show connection with Trump and that sort of trash TV background. So I think there's that inherited sort of part that you can't really recognize this existing figure as now being in this position. In fact, Xander Cannon, who I know I've banged on about Kaiju Max. I'm not talking about Kaiju Max, but he has written an essay on the changes to storytelling that Trump's presidency has introduced. And one of the tropes he mentions is I think he calls it the cosmic fascist or something like that. This idea that a very big, strong, bold, a fascist will arrive from space and put you under their heel and change the nature of society. Whereas he said what we've now seen is that it wasn't this big, strong, godlike presence, I suppose, like dark side, but it was a buffoon. It's much more in the sort of level of
star.
Yeah, or Charlie Chaplin as the great dictator. He did mention how Hitler's background, you wouldn't have actually seen him as being the person who would rise to that position, but he said that's now the fact that it's been seen recently and came about the way it did has changed that storyline. So I think there is an element of not being able to find the right box for him, like you mentioned with a lot of them, and also times it seemed that the time that he was president didn't respect the presidency in the same way that previous generations have. You mentioned and that time scale of even Nixon being respected for having the experience and the presence to be able to do his job. The fact that even when he was president, he seemed to have no respect for the office. So how on earth, news programs seem to change with their attitude to the presidency and to people who disagreed with the presidency. Social media wasn't around in those previous iterations of them. So it was such a heck of a lot to deal with, wasn't it? It was crazy.
No, yeah, I mean that's a good point actually, because it harks back to what I always felt, that there was respect no matter what behind Marvel trails, and it's a really good point. Yeah, if you don't respect the presidency, or you degrade the status as well.
This idea of then, in the past, a president would not have tweeted, or, okay, I know Twitter wasn't around back then, they wouldn't have made a statement outside of the protocols of the office, because they wouldn't have done that. It's not done. They didn't need to be told that. It was part of them recognizing that they were now in a different position. They didn't need standards or rules against it, because they would never have done it, because they knew it would have made the office look bad. That all changed, and to a certain extent still is affecting other governments, not just the US one. Now, if you can get away with it, then it's okay to say it, because there's no rule against it. You'll have governments denying, or statements, or Boris Johnson breaking international law. There
does seem a lack of protocol.
And they're like, well, no, nobody told me I couldn't do. There aren't any rules against this. That wouldn't have happened previously. And maybe it's because everyone wore a suit and a tie, but those things have changed, and that's one of the things I think that has changed in terms of how you approach the depiction of a president.
I mean, there's nothing to say that this might just be a permanent thing now. Unless anyone can help us out and point out any recent issues. I haven't actually seen Biden as president anywhere. I have a limited viewing of superhero Marvel titles at the moment. So if anyone has, please let us know.
That would be good to know.
But he already exists. He was portrayed previously when he was in the VP position. So I don't know whether it's going to be a permanent. Marvel are going to actually step back. Will be very interesting. I personally hope that they continue because it kind of gives a foot in the real world, which I quite like. And I think I can completely forgive skipping a president, but I also think that's quite a phenomenal decision as well.
Yeah,
and an interest.
No, it is. If you're going to have chat show hosts, or pop stars, comedians, then I think it's good that those other areas, and more appropriate for the president sometimes to pop up in Captain America than these others. Spider-Man meeting Alice Cooper or something like that seems to make sense.
I could almost do another podcast on topical American talk show hosts.
Yes. That's definitely increased, hasn't it? Yeah,
it has. I mean, again, when I first started reading, Letterman being in there, I had no idea who Letterman was. I don't think at that point, and then they started showing Letterman over here. It's quite interesting how much of a part of the American psyche that is actually. Well, if anyone can help us, just update that any further, let us know.
Right. Well, my entry is under the artist profile, which I've previously done a few of. But this is about Leonard Starr, who I always thought created the comic strip Little Orphan Annie. That I always associated the two, and consequently didn't really know a lot about him because, I just sidelined Little Orphan Annie as something I wouldn't be interested in. But it turns out he actually revived that strip, and along the way had some very surprising jobs. So let's go back to the beginning. Leonard Starr got his art education in New York at Manhattan High School of Music and Art and the Pratt Institute. And when he was attending Pratt, he got some comic book on, so this would have been early 40s, so early timely characters like the Submariner and the Human Torch. And he kept working, moved around the industry for lots of other publishers, including Crestwood, where he worked with Joe Simon and Jack Kirby on their early romance comics. So in particular, Young Romance. He was working in advertising as well as comics. So up till the mid 50s, he moved around. He was very busy in different forms. And then he made the jump to the much more respected field of the comic strip. We've mentioned this before, how the comic strip was much better regarded than the lowly comic book. And he ghosted on the Flash Gordon comic strip, leading to landing his own strip in 1957 called On Stage, later Mary Perkins on Stage. This was an adventure strip about a Broadway actress, well regarded. And this is where, again, I think I came across him later on. Well regarded for its great layouts and a good design sense and storytelling. Mentioned particularly by Butch Guice and Howard Chaykin, both big fans of the strip. And that's why I ended up looking him up. And I've actually bought a collection of Mary Perkins now, which I haven't got around to, but it looks fab. So he's working on Mary Perkins till about 1979. But in the meantime, he's still working in comics. He manages to squeeze in, I think, a few issues of Morbius, the Living Vampire, for Marvel. And then in 1979, he revives the comic strip Little Orphan Annie. So at this point, this strip, it had been in reprints since the original creator, Harold Gray. He died in 1968. So Leonard takes it over, retitles it Annie, and it's away again. Hugely popular. His incarnation of the strip received the National Cartoonist Society's Story Comic Strip Award in 1983 and 84. And he continued it successfully until his retirement in 2000, when it was passed on to other creators. But along the way, here's the fun bit. Starr expanded into animation in the 1980s, and he started writing TV scripts. And in 1984, he was asked to develop and write the Bible for Thundercats. He became the story editor and head writer, and eventually wrote 23 episodes. His Bible of the show that contained, the basic premise, the history, and the characters was written by him. He's responsible for creating most of the Thundercats characters, the mutants, Mum-Ra, as well as other minor characters like Burbles, Balkins, amongst others. He died in 2015, but I just thought it was such a cool, varied career. And I loved how many projects he had got involved in while still regularly producing this high-profile major comic strip.
I just love the link between Little Orphan Annie.
Thundercats.
So that's just awesome.
Brilliant. But he was, I don't know Thundercats so well myself, but I did read them up, and yeah, he was pretty much hands-on, and a lot of the story elements and character elements, I think the names he proposed were tweaked slightly for Lion-O and some of the bigger characters. But I just love the fact that, what a career, advertising, comics, comic strips, TV animation, it's astounding. And I do find the older I get that I do start to look back at work and view it differently. So it was why it was quite interesting to pick up this Mary Perkins book, because I'd have just seen it as a kind of, romance book or not really looked at it. Whereas now because it's a genre that I'm not aware of, I'm much more attracted to things that I'm less familiar with. So I'm looking forward to getting to grips with it.
This sounds like a very boutique coffee table volume.
It just looks great. I mean, to be honest, yeah, I got it used on I think it was $8, and it's smart. It's funny. I can see. I love Butch Guice, and I can see a lot of not similarities necessarily, but I can see certain considerations between the two drawing styles. Right. So I think he's obviously got a lot from him. So yeah, I just thought it was such an interesting varied career. So yeah, watch some Thundercats and read some Little Orphan Annie.
And see if you can spot the similarities.
Yeah. Right, well, that's all from the Good Book this episode. But if you have suggestions for entries, submissions of your own, things to review, Joe Biden appearances, or just want that comics-related questions you're always afraid to ask answered, the Yakapedia is here for you.
So you can email us at comicartpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, Twitter @comicartfestpod, or use the form at the comicartpodcast.wordpress.com to contact us.
Great.
Cheers all.
Thank you and good night.
we need to think of a sign off.
Yakapedia, Yakapedia, Yakapedia with my cat Pete. Yakapedia, Yakapedia, Yakapedia with my cat Pete.
Wasn't he good? You weren't ready for that, were you?
No.
Wasn't he good?
I was like, who, what, where?
Right. So we've got a bit of a sad announcement. Tom has decided to move on. No. Tom,
Leave us.
Tom, like me, has sort of had to fight through COVID in a sense.
You're still fighting through COVID, let's be honest.
Dealing with the negativity and everything and malarkey and all the change and everything.
Yeah.
And I think he's been a bit overwhelmed with the amount of stuff he's got to do. So this podcast, he did his own That Comic Smell podcast. Yep. And also just trying to find his love of comics as a whole. Yeah. Because you fall out of love and you come back and you sway and you forth.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah, and then, like you say, add on COVID. And also, we've done work for multiple podcasts before, and sometimes it just becomes a bit too much. You're almost you have to force yourself to do stuff because you've not got the time to do it. Yeah. And then the energy gets pulled out of you there as well. So understandably, he's going to step down for the time being in the podcast. Doesn't mean he can't pop on whenever he wants. He's still a friend.
Whenever he wants to throw a bit of content our way, he's more than welcome to.
Oh, of course.
We'll pay him the same rate.
We'll pay 100% more.
100% more with the same rate. 0. But no, just want to say big thank you to Tom.
Yes.
For the time he has put in. And even though he's not part of the podcast, if he makes it to Kendall, he's still welcome to a cocktail.
He's still part of the family. He can't shake us that easily. Once part of the podcast, always part of the podcast.
So yeah, thank you, Tom. And it's just amazing that anybody wants to put the time in.
Yes.
It's good. So if you love a little bit of Tom's voice, make sure you check out That Comic Smell podcast with him and his team, rambling about all sorts of comics. Small press, large press, big press,
middle press,
tiny press, every press.
Press-ups.
Press-ups. No, they're not doing that.
Flower pressing.
No press-ups.
Cider pressing.
Oh. Right. So again, thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you.
So there's some more guests announced for this year's Legs International Comic Art Festival.
Is that the official way of saying it?
Yes. Comic creators Stephen Appleby, Daryl Cunningham, Mark Jackson, Jacob Phillips, and Lucy Sullivan join the international lineup that already includes many other creators.
Is that because you don't know how to say some of them?
No, I just didn't want to keep reading.
Oh, okay.
Another load of creators thrown in the barrel there, thrown in the hat. Be interesting to see. Daryl's got a new book out.
Yes.
I know that. Stephen had a new one out last year. Jacob just seems to be throwing comics out left, right and centre. So, absolutely superb. Add to the ever-growing list of people. Festival. For the podcast that the festival that should be going on.
Oh, at the minute, it is going on.
At the minute.
If we can get this variant under control.
Yeah.
Then
we should be all right for then, surely.
Everyone
will have been vaccinated twice at that point.
I have been vaccinated twice. I am immortal.
So I should say everyone that wants to be will have been vaccinated twice by that point.
Immortal.
So, yeah.
I've got a cold. I've had a vaccine. I shouldn't be able to catch anything, really. I could pick up 5G. That's right, isn't it?
You have no idea what 5G is. Let's be honest.
No.
Some exhibitors have also been announced. Kate Mia White and Norma Conyu. Drew Marr will be there. The Everington brothers are returning.
Yay! Oh, James will be happy.
Gustavo Vargas is lovely.
He's lovely.
And Meta Throg will also be there in the town hall, as well as many others, which have yet to be announced, told, pushed out, whatever. pushed out to sell. You might find us in there yet. We're still planning and discussing.
Who are we?
Yeah. Who are we? What have they got to do with it?
Who are we? Are we?
Yes.
Oh, is that idea you had? Oh, God.
What?
Good luck, people.
So, yeah. It's basically we'll be doing, if it all goes to plan,
Don't tell anyone. No, keep it secret.
the podcast.
Oh. All right, you can say that.
That's clever, that.
That's very clever.
You've got no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah, they're going to figure that one out.
That's clever.
They're totally figuring that one out.
Okay, well, thank you very much for listening. Enjoy the summer weather.
Yes, whilst it lasts.
Whilst it lasts all the way through the summer.
Yeah, and then for lovely... What, we're coming back.
I know we are.
Oh, right.
I'm
The way
just
you're
being-
saying
I'm
it
just
sounds like
being
we're
nice.
just going till autumn
Just being
now.
polite.
All right.
And we did take a bit of a break last month, but we will be
That's
back
all right.
on the 1st of July.
We say that.
No, we've got episode.
He's got his finger in the air. It must be
got
important.
Episode plan.
Uh-huh.
Cast Iron Books
Oh, yes.
will be coming on
Lovely.
with Lyndon
Yay!
to talk about the new book there. So
Candles!
Lizzie, Lyndon will be coming on, and Jordan as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we've got a lineup ready to go. Just got to
great.
set a date, so that should be for the next episode.
Yay!
Cool. Thank you very much for listening,
Will Lyndon bring his rabbits?
and goodbye.
Thank you for listening. Find out more about the festival at comicartfestival.com. Find out more about the show and how to contact us at comicartpodcast.uk. Find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Music composed by Pop Noir.
This podcast is part of Britpod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritpodScene.com or Britpod Scene on Twitter to find out more.